Well, it is our great honor to have with us the former Secretary of State and author of a brand new book. It comes out tomorrow. It's called Democracy, Stories from the Long Road to Freedom. And Condoleezza Rice joins us live right now. Good morning to you.
Pleasure to be with you.
Rex Tillerson, who now has your job, you're one of the people who suggested to Donald Trump that he consider him. What was it about that guy, the gas guy, that you thought, you know what, he could fill my shoes?
Well, first of all, he was a terrific CEO, but he was an oil man. And oil people know the world like other people don't. They have to make long-tail investments in really difficult places. They have to deal with difficult people. Their people are often working in very harsh circumstances. Sounds like Secretary of State. And I really thought that he and the president might connect as business peers as well.
Had they ever met before that?
I don't think so, but I'm sure that that then President-elect Trump knew of him. Everybody knew of Rex Tillerson. He had a stellar reputation.
And how is Rex Tillerson doing now?
He's doing really well. He's doing really well. I think he has a very good relationship with the president, which, by the way, is the most important thing a Secretary of State can do, is establish that relationship. He is speaking out. I thought he was brilliant, by the way, in Moscow, when he said that the Russians, with the chemical weapons ban that they'd supposedly gotten with Assad, he said they were either incompetent or they weren't telling the truth. I would never have had the nerve to say that, but good for him.
And he did have a one-on-one meeting, too, and Bob Gates also recommended him, I understand, with you to do that, so I think it went a long way.
And you guys used to play golf together?
We did.
Right?
We played golf together.
They say all these deals happen on the golf course,
but also,
right?
including in the AT&T, you know, where you're a little nervous and you're trying to help each other out. So Rex is a great person.
One of 3 women accepted to be a member of Augusta National, which is a big deal.
That's right.
So important for the Secretary of Defense. You didn't have this to get along with the Secretary of State. Yeah. They seem to be getting along. In fact, I understand they meet to get on the same page even before they go to see the president.
Absolutely. And I know Jim Mattis very well as well. He was at Hoover for a number of years as a senior fellow there. Now, I did have a great relationship with, particularly with Bob Gates, and it matters a lot when the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense can say to all the people below them, look, don't try to bring about conflict between the two of us. We are going to work together. And then that message goes down through the entire government that the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense are working together.
Exactly. Now, Vladimir Putin, very few people in this country know more about the Russians and Soviets than you. Did you predict when you met this deputy mayor standing in the corner, as you write in your book, that this guy would emerge as this dominant power for Russia? And what has he done to that country?
I did not, and I didn't even, when I first met him as president of Russia, some number of years later, when President Bush and I met him in Slovenia, I didn't think we would see what we have seen. But we now know that he was harboring deep resentment about the end of the Cold War. He's a former KGB officer. He saw the collapse of the Soviet Union, as he said, as a tragedy. And he really believes he is reestablishing Russian authority, Russian influence in the world. Unfortunately, if you have to take the territory of Ukraine to do it, well, so be it. And what you have to do with Vladimir Putin, because he respects strength, he tries to intimidate. If you're not intimidated, he respects that. You have to establish the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are, we are not going to allow Russia to threaten our allies in the Baltic states or in Eastern Europe. We are never going to countenance the fact that they have taken the territory of Ukraine. And if you establish those facts, and by the way, I also think what President Trump has done in rebuilding the American defense budget is sending a very strong message that America is back in the game.
Should we send arms to the Ukrainians? Should we have instead of blankets, and should we now?
I would arm the Ukrainians. I don't think you want to be very careful about how you arm any group that is facing an insurgency. We sort of learned that lesson in Afghanistan when we found weapons on the other side. Right. But we should indeed arm the Ukrainians. Let them defend themselves. Since when is it a bad principle that people who are trying to defend themselves don't have the means to do so?
You talk about finding, in your book called Democracy, finding democratic openings in other countries. When you have a totalitarian government that collapses, like what we've seen in Syria, Is there a chance for democracy there?
The hardest case is when a totalitarian regime is either overthrown or collapses because you don't have any institutions underneath. When you think about totalitarian regimes, they control every aspect of life. Even in authoritarian regimes, you might have a little bit of civil society or maybe a free university here or there. Those are the hardest cases. And one of the things I really wanted to say with this book is don't think that all democracy promotion is like Iraq and Afghanistan. Those were the hardest cases where we went there for security reasons. We didn't overthrow Saddam Hussein to bring democracy. We did it because he was a security threat. Then we said the Iraqi people need a pathway to democracy. But those are the hardest cases. We've also helped Colombia to reclaim its future from the FARC. That was an effort at democracy promotion. We helped Kenya after a really bad election to find an answer.
We can't do it for
when the
them.
president told the president of Kenya, you need to step down.
That's right.
How'd that go over?
He did.
Right.
Sure.
So I want to talk about where your book starts, and that's our Constitution, because it's being debated again. As an African-American woman, do you see yourself in this Constitution? Do you think that when we look at 9 of our first 12 presidents as slave owners, should we start taking their statues down and saying we're embarrassed by you?
I am a firm believer in keep your history before you. And so I don't actually want to rename things that were named for slave owners. I want us to have to look at those names and recognize what they did and be able to tell our kids what they did and for them to have a sense of their own history. When you start wiping out your history, sanitizing your history to make you feel better, it's a bad thing. But let me just say one thing about our Constitution. That Constitution originally counted my ancestors as 3/5 of a man. And then in 1952, my father had trouble registering to vote in Birmingham, Alabama. And then in 2005, I stood in the Ben Franklin room, one of our founders. I took an oath of office to that same Constitution, and it was administered by a Jewish woman Supreme Court justice. That's the story of America. The long road to freedom has indeed been long. It's been sometimes violent. It's had many martyrs. But ultimately, it has been Americans claiming those institutions for themselves and expanding the definition of we the people.
Does it make you think less of, should we think less of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson because they were slave owners?
Well, they were people of their times. I wish they had been like John Adams, who did not believe in slavery. I wish they had been like Alexander Hamilton, who was an immigrant, by the way, a child of questionable parentage from the Caribbean. I wish all of them had been like that, and Jefferson in particular. A lot of contradictions in Jefferson, but they were people of their times. And what we should celebrate is that from the Jeffersons and the Washingtons as slave owners, look at where we are now.
Sure. Where we are now is we have a president by the name of Donald J. Trump.
Yes.
I know, over the last couple of years, when he was running, maybe he wasn't your #1 guy on the list.
No, that's right.
How's he doing now?
Well, he's president, and I respect the presidency. I respect anybody who gets elected to that office. And I think he is really starting to fill in the job. It's hard. He's the first president in our history who had absolutely no experience in government of any kind. He's brought really excellent people in, great national security team, and you're starting to see him feel what the American presidency can do. When he said about those Syrian babies, I can't watch Syrian babies choking on chemical gas and not do something about it. That's the President of the United States speaking.
We were talking earlier and in the green room, and you said you think he's getting a little more presidential.
Well, I think he's really feeling the weight of that office. When you walk into the Oval Office and you've got Abraham Lincoln on the wall, and he saved the country from the dissolution of the Civil War. And over there's George Washington, who, despite the fact that a third of his troops were down to smallpox, he managed to win the Revolutionary War. And then there is a Democrat like Franklin Roosevelt, who rallied the people to defeat Adolf Hitler. And so you feel the weight of that presidency. You're sitting behind Roosevelt's desk. I think you see it. And the American presidency is the most special institution in all of human history. And the person who occupies it has to be about the presidency, not just about himself.
Right. And do you think that are you surprised that somebody, you saw President Bush, a lot of blowback on President Bush.
Yeah.
Are you surprised about the volume of pushback on this president?
Well, it has been louder than any in my experience. And maybe it's partly the fact that it was an unusual election of someone who had not been in office. It came out of a very important moment in our history. Someone has called it, a friend of mine, the "Do You Hear Me Now" election. People who felt that they were not being served by their institutions. And so perhaps it exposed some of the divisions in our country. And, you know, we all talk about divisions, but let's remember, and I hope what we'll get to, is that America is an idea. It is not nationality, religion, ethnicity. It's an idea. And that idea is, you can come from humble circumstances and you can do great things because the Founding Fathers promised you life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And one reason that I wanted to write this book is I wanted Americans to start with our own story of struggle.
Absolutely.
To make that right, but then to recognize that we're at our best when we also stand for that for others. It can't be true for us
and
not for them.
I love the story that you were talking about taking the oath. Are you planning on running for president one day?
Oh my goodness, no. I don't.
Definitely no.
I do not have that DNA.
You gave it some thought, though.
Well, doesn't everybody? But no, I ran for president of the Rice family, and that's good enough. I won at age 4.
And you're doing great stuff at the Hoover Institute. This is an incredible book,
Thank
and I'll
you.
talk to you more about it on radio.
You bet.
At a short time.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice.
Thank you.